So I'm here with Beatrice Leong, B, and Beatrice Leong is a autistic filmmaker in Malaysia, and I am going to ask her a few questions um, today for this interview. Um, so Bea, I think one question that I wanted to start with um, before getting into your career in filmmaking, um, when did you first realize you were neurodivergent and what was that like for you?
Wow. That seems to be, like as much as I always say, oh, I'm late diagnosed, but now it seems as if it's been a lifetime ago. So I was diagnosed in over the period of COVID. So that must have been 5, 6 years ago. Um, but I think I come from a more complex background or trajectory to get into that, like prior to that diagnosis. Even from as a young child, I've been through many different kind of diagnoses, but autism was just never part of the conversation. I've always known I was dyslexic. I knew I had differences. I had a lot of mental health challenges. I was even misdiagnosed with schizophrenia, borderline, bipolar, schizoaffective. I was also institutionalized before in long-term psychiatric care. But all of that in that journey, autism never came into the picture until my mid 30s. So I'm in my early 40s now, and that's going to now be broadcast to the world. But yeah, so the autism came into the picture 5, 6 years ago. The assessment took a long time, not just because I couldn't go through the standard ADOS, or I didn't go through the usual channels of like how an adult would usually sometimes get diagnosed. I had to do a battery of tests, so it took way longer. I went through the neuropsychologist route. So yeah, so it took a while, but here I am. Although formal diagnosis or not, I think I've always knew it was different, but maybe the vocabulary just came now.
Yeah, I see. I think I can really relate to the feeling of it being more assuring to have the vocabulary for things because I wasn't diagnosed until I was 16, but I remember when I was growing up as a child, especially in school situations and such, having these struggles socially and feeling like everyone spoke sort of a different language, and or just like they knew this special code and like how to interact, and then also just having certain like sensory sensitivities and such like things like I
Yeah.
made a lot more sense later. Um,
I mean, I've always felt, I just want to add to that. I've always felt as if like I'm watching someone else's life, like I'm watching me. Like, what are you doing? What are you gonna do next? What are you gonna say next? Like I'm always just watching. I'm never part of who I am.
yeah,
Uh, until when things started to make sense in the last 6 years, that's the only time that I started feeling like, oh, now I could sit in my body and relearn how to, and it's actually really strange feelings to like, oh, okay, so this is actually what being alive was like. I remember thinking like that at the start. Yeah.
yeah. I relate to the kind of observing and a lot like never really being fully engaged in conversations, because I'm always studying the other person and trying to figure out like how they're reacting and what they're expecting, and like it feels like it is really hard to just stay in there because there's this automatic response that happens. Um, and then I wanted to ask you next about why you picked this career in filmmaking. I know you have other things that you do as well, that you're also an advocate and that there's other work that you do. Um, but was it uh before or after that you discovered your neurodivergence and
Um,
qualities that autistic qualities that you would say contribute to your excellence in film?
um, I think the film and storytelling started first. Um, I would love to say that I found this career, but I think no one was hiring me except for this one producer. So after, like I said, like I was put away in long-term psychiatric care for a little while, and after I came out, I was kind of at a loss. I wasn't sure what to do. I didn't know where to go. And I was really just sitting around. I couldn't also work at that time. It was tough. And there was a lot of shame then as well, and also having still yet no answers. And then I saw someone posted for an assistant, a production assistant, which really is, you do just about everything for a documentary project with a producer. And I applied. Not, you know, I didn't have an expectation. I was just applying, and I wasn't, I'm a design and fashion graduate, so this also wasn't really in what I was thinking of doing. Um, and then I applied, and the producer, who's now a great friend of mine, also part mentor, um, she took the chance on me, knowing that I had absolutely no experience, no background. And from then on, I learned a lot about observing people. And I think, like, naturally, I've been observing people anyway, of learning how people work. But seeing it again from like a fourth wall with the camera, actually something clicked, that like, oh wow, people, you can actually do this professionally as well. And I become quite good at observing for little nuances. And I love the idea of how a story, someone else's real life story, could be impactful. And there's so much that you could do. And I just love the entire process of researching, interviewing, asking people questions about their lives, learning about it. There was just something about it. And I've always loved films and stories anyway. And then I think it just kind of took a life of its own. It hasn't always been the only thing that I do, but it had always been that one thing that helped me together. So I've been in and out. I've done TV shows, I've done films. And then for a while I exited production, because it was, as much as it was giving me a lot, it's also an extremely stressful pathway. I'm sure all documentary filmmakers, I think you shared a little bit of how, your experience is. It's, it's such a beautiful career, but it's so untenable. Um, and then I found my diagnosis, and then I went into activism and advocate. But in the last few years, I've started coming back to look into documentaries again, and this time telling my own story. has been the most exciting thing I've done in my entire life, and also the hardest. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Um, do you get to do hyper focus on a project, and have you been in burnout even when you were doing, I mean, I think you already did sort of talk about that, being in burnout even when you're doing something you really love.
I I've just recently had this chat. So one great thing about the path I'm taking with my documentary filmmaking at the moment, it had allowed me, or it had given me an access to work with a film mental health supervisor. So she's a psychotherapist who specifically only work with documentary filmmakers because there are it's such a niche uh job. I It feels weird to call making documentaries a job because I feel as if it's something that I need to do, not because I want to make a career out of it. And because I'm making such a personal documentary where I'm my own director and my own protagonist, and I'm exploring a theme about institutionalization, abuse, and autism, and being a disabled filmmaker. So I've been working with someone, and I'm going through a I don't know how honest I could be, but I'm in I'm going through a really rough period at the moment, combined with a lot of production stress, funding stress, and life stuff, and almost a burnout. But we had this conversation just a few days ago where I told her that, and when I'm at a point of burnout, I have more frequent meltdowns because things becomes a lot more difficult for me. And I told her this, which is something I was so surprised that I started. It also came as a surprise to myself, that I have come to a point where I'm not preventing being burnout or having a meltdown anymore. It had become, this is a big part of who I am. This is a part of how I'm gonna exist in this world, because I think I fought for so long in 40 years over of my life of like, don't get into a meltdown, don't be burnout, don't overstretch myself. And I found that when I begin thinking of that, the coping mechanism become a lot more stressful, toxic, unhealthy, and I start to limit myself. But now I've come to a space where I allow myself to, if you're going to feel not great right now, then you're going to feel not great right now. If you're in the middle of a burnout, let's deal with how do you take care of yourself while you're having a burnout, instead of like, I don't want to hit a burnout. And I'm coping so much better now, like, but having this support from this therapist really helped as well, because she kind of like laid that foundation. I mean, I don't know if that makes sense to you.
That
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense. Yeah. Um, I relate a lot to I used to struggle when I was in burnout, or when I was even in a situation, if I was having a meltdown or something, I would try to avoid it, or get away from it, but that would tend to make it worse, because it's there and I needed to experience it, um in order to get through it. Um so
I mean, sorry if I'm adding thing, but I think with this whole meltdown things, and maybe also in film, it does happen when I'm on a production. Sometimes I do have a meltdown, and I think meltdowns are really hard to. I think from the outside, I won't deny that it's hard to look at. It's hard to look at someone and you don't understand. But at the same time, I think where I am at now, at the moment, when a meltdown happened and I've come to accept it, is also because I've stopped demonizing my own meltdowns as well. I used to feel bad and guilty, but learning so much about who I am and my triggers and sensory and how much capacity I can actually take had also taught me that if I'm in a meltdown, it isn't because I am not capable, but more of I've really just hit the limit and there's nothing I could do. No amount of like closing up the Coke bottle is gonna help. I feel that that's been a I think that's that big autism journey and something that something I wish for a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, do you have any tips for neurodivergent individuals that are wanting to have a career in filmmaking?
I swear by my film mental health therapist, but it's such a niche and it is not accessible, it's not easily accessible. But I think we live in an era where when we talk about films, everything is about big budgets, everything is about how you're gonna get funded, what kind of what kind of trend are you going for? At the end of the day, and especially for neurodivergence, right? When you start getting into that, where you start being more commercialized, people are telling you what kind of films or what kind of content that you want to do, and a lot of us tend to want to please the world because we all are looking for somewhere to belong. But I think this is also myself to really learn over why did you want to tell a story in the first place? Making films, whether it's documentary or as a commercial film, it comes from a place where you want to tell a story. Some of us want to tell stories of fantasy that we have in our brain. Some of us, like me, I want to tell the world my story because I feel as if there's something in there that I hope could help other people. um and to never forget that, and I think and to always make sure that we don't we don't have our foundation of why we want to tell stories be overtaken by other people's voices, and that will help us come back into discerning, do I want to commercialize this? Is there another way I could do it that stick true to myself? um and and I think that's so important because, with neurodivergent filmmakers and storytellers, even among the peers that I've met, I feel as if we always feel as if we owe it to the world to play by their version of a story about ourselves. And then we forget because we are not given the space and time to process. But I want everybody to remember that stories from disabled and neurodivergent storytellers are so unique, so rare. How often are we given a space to tell our stories ourselves without having to be approved by someone else? And look at the amount of, look at all the disability stories that we see. Really, how many of them are made or told by ourselves? It's such a privilege for us to be able to do this. And in thinking through that, I think it doesn't matter where you tell the story. A great story is a great story. And the fact that we want to tell our stories or make our stories is huge enough. So if it ends up to be a Facebook post or an Instagram reel, I think we should just go for it anywhere, anyhow in the world. um but of course there are, in saying that, I am trying to make a theatrical run release of my film. I've got a short film as well, hoping to get into festivals soon. But But to not let all these other big things in thinking that, it only matters if it's go to the cinema, it doesn't. Yeah, I remind myself that every day as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to resist the societal pressure. Um I remember like to do, a story in a certain way or to follow like certain trends or whatnot. It drives me crazy because I remember I was doing my first little project. It was just like a short comedy and it was like meant to be like just a passion project. And I got so much like I had this one friend um who was like really I understand that like she thought she was helping me, but she was just giving me this like all speech about like marketing and like trends and what I was supposed to do because what people wanted to watch and because like my film was sort of about COVID and then she kept saying like, oh, people don't want to watch things about COVID anymore, and it's like I think first of all, COVID is a very real thing that's still
Yeah.
affecting a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
especially the disabled community. And I think second of all, I don't care like what the trend is or what like the world wants me to do. I've always felt like a lot of neurodivergent people, including myself, we have our own styles and our own ways, and I think we thrive a lot better when we're just following our own instincts and like this is how we want to tell our stories.
And I so hear you. Like, so I'm in a space with a documentary process where we have to pitch our film. So I meet with a lot of funders, different type of producers around the world. I've kind of taken it to market for a while, and I so hear you about the marketing things. And for a while, because this is going to be my first feature length film, I felt that like, okay, they are the expert. I should listen to them, which and I don't mean to like just discard them, but sometimes I do feel I get so swept away because there are so many assumptions about what a disabled and an autistic story could be. And I think the way that we language things, the way that we do things, sometimes people don't understand. Like, when I try to explain sensory differences, many would have thought that like, oh, she just doesn't like loud noise, but it's so much more than that. So people started giving me a lot of advice over, not advice, like well-intentioned meaning of like, oh, maybe not this, maybe not that, and everybody wanted, how do we get an inspirational and a hopeful story out of this? And I refuse that narrative because I'm not your lesson. I'm not
Yeah,
your lesson. I have like real stories. I think George has his real story. It took a while to really get over it and the process, but I would say that the filmmaking process of I'm not saying that everybody should make a personal story, but having that time to myself to view my footage on screen over and over again also allow me space to see who I am in a different perspective. I also saw this woman change in 5 years because I've been looking at vlogs, footages, and then when I compare it to archive materials that I've had from 10 years ago that I'm trying to see how can I use them, and I saw a different life on my timeline, that really empowers me to also start pushing back that you don't know what I'm seeing. That's not the story that I'm seeing, and that's why I also keep going back. Like, we need more disabled filmmakers because you don't see stories like ours
yeah,
at all, at
yeah.
all.
It's
Yeah.
true. Like it really is very frustrating that most films and TV shows out there about disability nowadays, most of them are not, they don't have any, there are barely any disabled people, if any, if at all, involved in the writing and the directing and even like with the acting. I think it's just now starting to get a little better, but it's very astonishing how historically all these shows out there are just like there's very little actual representation, and then I feel like that harms the it's not just like the autistic and neurodivergent in general actors that aren't getting jobs which they would be very qualified for, which would, it's just like the representation ends up suffering too because you're getting the perspective of the neurotypical person, and
Mhm.
it's just frustrating because it's like that's what I know they do it this way because it's like what sells with neurotypical audiences, but it's not really telling the authentic perspective of the autistic person, and it's like just telling like, oh, what is this person perceived as? Because I remember like there's certain shows that I will watch and it's like written by neurotypicals, and it's just I'm like, okay, I think that's what people think I say, or that's what people think I do, but it just feels very inauthentic.
Yes, I completely agree, and I see this, and I think I'm going to add one more layer to this, the diversity of representation. I live in Asia. I'm Southeast Asian, Malaysian through and through. I'm not I'm not like, I'm not BIPOC. We are so different. The lives that we lead are so different. So every time someone say, "Oh, but that's an Asian autistic person," there, I'm like, "Yeah, but that's American Asian autistic person. It's so different from the life and the family life that I lead, and the ones that I need, or the values that we carry." I wish that the diversity was expanded so much more, and to even within the neurodivergent filmmaking or creators um community, right? Like, who gets funded in this? Who
Yeah,
gets the resources to make film? Who gets the support? Who gets the platform? How much, geographically, how much closer are we? Um, I think there's so much at play at the moment, and it's becoming so urgent because the rise of people recognizing themselves as autistic is so high at the moment, and I love that. So I would want them to see on TV like a version of themselves. I want a Malaysian young girl who's just learned that she's autistic to see another story of an autistic Malaysian girl figuring out her lives. And I don't need that person on TV to achieve award. She don't need a Nobel Prize. I just want to see, how does she go to a restaurant? What is it like for her to date? What is it like for her to get married, right? I feel strongly about all this, and there's just so much more that I wish we could do, and to reallocate the focus that we have on what does it mean to be a neurodivergent, to decolonize the idea of autism. I
yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose this is one of my motivation to also keep working out my feature. It's been very, very tough. Because but at the end of the day, like, I wanted that film make more than it's something personal for myself. It's also something that I want to add into the pool, so that other Asian autistics would say, "Hey, maybe I'm gonna make a film too." I would love to see that in the near future.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. That definitely, I think we do need a lot more diversity and representation, including within the autistic community for sure. Um, has Another question I have here is, has advocating and filmmaking helped spark connections with other neurodivergent people?
Um, yes and no, not necessarily neurodivergence. I I think in the whole journey of trying to put this film together, participating in a lot of storytelling lab features, I've been given such great opportunities. The awards given even just at the start, the help. I think not just being a part, not just connecting with other neurodivergents, but it's also connecting with many different individuals who took attention to my project. And I could see in the years before, in the last few years, how some of these people have been really trying to understand my world. And that's been mind blowing for me because you know, a lot of all these big names or big industry people, you can hardly get them to reply your emails. And for many, like I think I've been very lucky, and this shows me how important it is to want to keep making it, or to finish it. I let's not say keep making it, to finish it, um, because it really does change people's perspective. And I could see how some of the pitch forums and festivals I've been a part of, or industry festivals, they've changed some of the way they've operated because I participated. The accommodations that they've made for me, the continued engagement of like, oh, how can we do better for other people? That have been so rewarding. But more recently, because I've had the opportunity to finish a short film version of the story that I want. It's a standalone film, but it's a short film. It's also my own story. And it's centered around a relationship that I have with my mother and about what had happened to us because of the autism diagnosis. Um, and I started doing a couple of small, close community screening just to get feedback and buy-in, just to see where we are landing. I mean, people were very receptive to it, but what really touched, or what really got to me, that I would cry at night when I read the comments, were autistics themselves who would give me feedback of like, that's exactly my story. Or or when they say like, thank you for telling me the story, and then they would tell me their story, and I feel so honored, um because I think it's such a big thing sometimes to be able to tell someone something really painful that sometimes happened to you. And if I'm the first person to get out there to say it, and then I'm enable someone else to exchange that with me, it's such an honor. Yeah.
Yeah, I did get a chance to watch the link to the film like you sent, and I really liked it. I vividly remember the first scene of the sensory overload, and I feel like that was a very good representation of sensory overload, and I think that's definitely something that I think neurotypicals struggle to really capture very well, because I feel like they focus more on like what it looks like from the outside, like the a child like covering his ears or maybe wearing headphones, which is like, yes, it we do that on the outside, but I think it doesn't really show the inside experience of like, these are like the sounds and this is like how it's overwhelming, um So I thought that was really well done, the sensory part. Yeah.
I've got to thank my editor and my music for that because I think I had such great collaborators for the short film. When that opening, when my editor suggested it, he was like, I'm trying something new. I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to watch this. And when I watched that, because we've been struggling of how much do you want to expose, and because it's such an intimate moment, and also but when I watched that opening, I was like, this is it, this is how we're going to start because it breaks open the myth about what being overloaded and even a meltdown with. And we purposely picked that part because, if you don't know anything about me, you would have think that I was just yelling at someone. But with that insight of what it actually feels, what I'm hearing, the leveling of the audio that we're playing, I felt that we did my collaborators did such a great job into showing people what's going on inside my head. um, yeah, that's I love that opening. But that's really my editor's brilliance. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I thought it was really great. Like it's just great. One of the things that really doesn't get shown enough is the inside experience of the sensory overload. Um so there's one final question that I have. Um what have been the main challenges of speaking openly about neurodiversity in Asia?
I don't get hired anymore. No, no, that's not I think I don't know. Because I think I've always been someone who been really open and spoke my mind even before the autism and neurodivergence or neurodiversity came into the conversation. When I was put away in psychiatric ward, I talked about it. When I was diagnosed with all the different diagnoses, I talked about it. I talk about women. I've always been a women activist anyway. I'm true and true feminist. Um, but the added layer of when I started then mapping or really telling the story about myself, at the start it was very overwhelming because I think especially in Malaysia, because I wrote very, very vividly and I wrote very openly about that. um and I was so insistent in the first 2 years of like all and I made a point about this. You want to talk about autism, ask the autistic person themselves, and I made sure that that was the case. And I think it was something so new to everybody. It was so new that like, wow, what is this experience? Why are we suddenly talking about, um and 6 years ago, when you Google autism in Malaysia, you only get like stories of parents or autism speak like kind of content, support children. Now I'm really proud that if you Google autism Malaysia, things that I've spoke, interviews about me, are almost always on the first, second page. And that makes a difference because then other people chime in. So I start to see so many more other neurodivergent content creator from Malaysia. I love them. I could never do social media. So, hats off to them. Like people were talking, people were emailing. So those were the great part. But I'm also very political. Very, very I advocate also on a higher policy level. And in fact, I'm serving my country in the National Disability Council, the first autistic person. So that now it puts me onto a whole different uh view and perspective over how I talk about myself, how it become more than a personal story. Um, and I start to see people fear. I use the word fear isn't to say that people are scared of me. But I feel as if like, we as human beings, we are always wary and we fear what we don't know. And here comes this person who wants to tell you something that you don't know so that you can make a consideration for it when we design our act, our disability act, our policies, or what's going to happen to autistic people when they grow old, right? And I think I have become a challenge to a lot of people more and more in the last 2 years because of how political I've become. Um, and um, and maybe because I've also found so much more confidence in like knowing that what I'm saying has to be heard. Um, Maybe the word fear challenging. So because I've challenged other people, I make people feel uncomfortable. I would say that it 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 does affect me a little bit because I have to reconsider how much am I challenging people before I lose them in an engagement in my advocacy. Um, so it becomes a back. So now I'm in a reflective stage as well on like what's next for me. And obviously because of how challenging I am for some people, it's not easy to put me on board for any jobs because I will call you out.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that part is a push and pull. I don't know if it's a bad thing or a good thing, but I do find this is a new space I'm learning as an autistic advocate. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah. Um, it can be tricky, 'cause I know just a little bit from like, um, even because when I started doing, I started speaking out about autism a few years ago on social media, and it would be frustrating because I would post something like really important about autism or talking about a certain problem or this or that, or like what something that society isn't very accommodating of, and what my experience was, and I will get very little engagement. And then I'll post something like a personal photo with my family, or something like that, and then I'll get all these likes and comments and engagement. And then it would make me a little bit frustrated because I would be like, "Oh, okay, so you guys are there, you guys are listening." But when I'm
but
talking about this serious autism stuff, you guys don't.
but that's my experience too. I've learned this as well. I would like sure I made effort to write something that I think is important. Um, but you know, to be fair, I do get when I need to, I do get great support and engagement. But I'm like, but why is it that when I post a photo of me eating ice cream, like I get like more people commenting and um but that teach me a lot that it's also why the storytelling and making the film is so important because I realized that I want to say such big things but it's the personal of it that resonates so much with people. So I'm constantly trying to work out ways on like, how do I make this that the next person to me wants to engage on a personal basis, that it become a shared experience instead of like Beatrice trying to tell you something. Which funnily is also actually how that that was the main development of the film. I started off with like, I need to tell you about the laws that I want to change about the autism and stuff like that. And then I went back and forth with it, and it felt like as if there was a huge burden on me to explain autism to such a huge audience. But at the heart of it, I realized that, which is also learning about like who's liking what kind of photos,
Mm,
and it becomes about me and my mom, me and my dogs and my cats, and and that become a vehicle for people to want to learn more. Yeah, so
yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. It is nice when I get like this like I was able to one thing I did last year is I made a little short documentary with some different autistic people that I had met in support groups, and it just really came to me one morning, this idea. It was like because I had been wanting to like tell this like high masking, I mean, I think even just the general autistic story, but like what it was like for me too with my masking patterns, because I think that's the like a lot of people don't see that what goes on behind the mask. And I was trying to find a way like how do I do this? Like how do I tell this story like through characters or whatnot? And then I just thought, wait a second, I know all these people that I've met, and it's like they could tell their story. So I had this idea I'll like do a documentary style thing, and I could tell that that really got to people like when I made that documentary, and like I showed it, to like I sent it to a variety of different people, and I got a lot of positive feedback, and including from neurotypicals, and I think I could sort of feel like, oh, I think this was really helpful for them, because a lot of them would tell me like, oh, this was really helpful, this was really insightful,
Yep.
and is like a really good way of really showing them that internal experience. It just there was something different for sure about like just like writing about it, or just um even just talking about it on my podcast. I don't know, I think it just really I could tell that did it had a different impact on them.
Yeah, like I think I don't know if you had this experience. Sometimes like I feel that like I'm just putting something really normal to me out there, like this is what am I? And then someone tells me, what on earth are you thinking?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, what do you mean? You don't think like that? You don't see it like
Yeah.
that? I
Yeah.
still get that sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that too. Um, like something will just feel very normal or very natural to me, and I'm talking about that, and then someone is watching it, and they'll be like, "Oh, wow, that," they're just like really taken aback by it. But I feel like it happens like a lot when I'm just talking like day to day too. Like if
Yeah,
it's usually when I'm not trying to be funny, or when I'm just like responding in like
exactly.
how I usually respond or something, and then people laugh, and it's like, oh, okay, I wasn't trying to be funny, but
Yeah, because sometimes I'll be like doing something and I was like, oh, you know, this. And then people would laugh and they're like, are you joking? And I'm like, no, like, I'm serious. Like, isn't this what it is? Isn't this the step to get there?
okay,
I sometimes take it for granted. Like, but in return, I sometimes get so fascinated by people who are neurotypical. I'm like, really? This is how you do things? Or like, really?
yeah,
You just get up? You just get up and do it? Great
yeah,
on
like
you.
remember things, and like, cause I have ADHD as well, so um, like struggle with forgetting things, or like I'll have to have like post-it notes, to remember things, and
Yeah.
then there's people like neurotypicals will sometimes um just they'll be kind of confused by that, because they're used to like having that come on demand, and then I'm like, oh wow, I
I'm
must
like, no, no, that's not my work. It doesn't come on demand. I make it seem as if I do, but no, that's like 100 notes and 100 alarms on my phone. Gotta remind me today's a throw a trash day. Today I've got to like buy this.
uh,
Yeah, which really goes back to like I think as you know, going back to telling stories and making films, right? I mean, I think all of us who are doing this, we are an advocate of sort, on an activist of sort. And sometimes I feel we feel that we have such big things to tell, which we do. Um, but it's the small everyday life that I have found to really help make people understand my perspective. Um, and rather than isolating my own experience, I have found that even in getting myself to understand what is a shared experience with other people who are not like me had been the most impactful, not just in the message I want to tell them, but for myself to also find that bridge to the neurotypical life, so I don't have such a hard time guessing sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Um, well, those are all the questions I have. But this was a really great conversation.
I
Um,
hope it's helpful.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I wanted to thank you again for doing this
no
interview.
problem.
Um, and yeah, I this was really great.